Think of a man in his early 40s. He has built his life on discipline. His calendar is color-coded. He tracks his sleep. He counts his calories. He has spreadsheets for his investments, reminders for every meeting, and a 5-year plan for his career. Even his worship has become measurable. He never misses Fajr. He finishes a set number of Qur'an pages every day. He has a target for charity every month. From the outside, everything looks beautifully organized. But one morning after Fajr, he reaches the opening of Surah Yaseen. He reads, Yaseen. He pauses. His mind immediately asks, what exactly does this mean? He searches for an answer. He finds opinions. He finds possibilities. He finds respectful disagreement among scholars. But he finds no certainty. Without realizing it, something inside him becomes restless. Not because the Quran has become unclear, but because this is one place where he cannot organize revelation into neat categories. He cannot optimize it. He cannot master it. He can only receive it. That discomfort tells us something important. Not about the Quran, about ourselves. In Al-Fut al-Makkiyah, Ibn Arabi returns again and again to the idea that all true knowledge belongs to Allah alone. Human beings do not own knowledge. They participate in it by Allah's permission. That sounds obvious until you examine your own heart. How often do you treat knowledge as a possession? How often do you feel secure because you know more than you knew yesterday? Knowledge is a blessing. Seeking knowledge is an obligation. But the ego has a remarkable talent. It takes every blessing and quietly asks, how can this become about me? The same self that once competed for status in wealth now competes for status in understanding. The same heart that wanted people to admire its success begins wanting people to admire its insight. The costume changes. The actor remains the same. This is where the unexplained letters quietly expose something hidden. They deny the ego its favorite sentence, now I have mastered it. The Quran begins one of its most beloved chapters by reminding every scholar, every student, every teacher, every imam, and every ordinary believer that revelation remains Allah's speech before it becomes our interpretation. There is extraordinary mercy in that. Imagine trying to hold water in your hands. Open your palms, and some remains. Clench your fists, and it slips through your fingers. Meaning often behaves the same way. The harder the ego squeezes, the less it receives. The more the heart relaxes before Allah, the more it becomes capable of receiving what cannot be forced. Modern psychology refers to something called the illusion of control. Human beings consistently overestimate how much influence they have over events, outcomes, and even understanding itself. Researchers have found that this illusion can reduce anxiety temporarily, but it also creates frustration whenever reality refuses to cooperate. Ibn Arabi described the spiritual version of this centuries ago. The servant who believes he controls access to divine realities closes himself to the very gift he seeks. Science describes the pattern. Ibn Arabi tells you the cure. The cure is surrender, not passive surrender, not intellectual laziness, not abandoning scholarship, rather the surrender of ownership. Study deeply, read tafsir, learn Arabic, ask scholars, reflect on every verse. Then, after exhausting your effort, stand before Allah and say with complete honesty, "You know what I do not." That sentence is not the end of knowledge, it is the beginning of wisdom. His names teach us, His signs guide us, His revelation draws us near, but He always remains greater than every description we can produce. That is why mystery is not the opposite of knowledge. Sometimes mystery protects knowledge from becoming arrogance. Have you noticed how quickly the ego says, "I already know this verse"? I've heard this lecture, I've read this tafsir. The Qur'an has not become familiar. Your attention has become lazy. The words did not lose their depth. You stopped expecting depth. This is why the unexplained letters remain permanently fresh. Every generation stands before them with the same limitation. Every generation is reminded that revelation is always larger than its readers. There is another lesson hidden here. Many of us secretly believe that Allah is distant because we do not understand enough. But Ibn Arabi gently turns that assumption upside down. Distance is not always caused by lack of information. Sometimes it is caused by lack of receptivity. You can memorize every classical commentary and still approach the Quran as though it were only an academic object. Another person may know far less, yet open the Mushaf with a heart full of humility, dependence, and longing. Neither scholarship nor sincerity should exist without the other. Islam calls us to both, but only one of them can open the heart. Knowledge illuminates the road. Humility gives you the ability to walk it. That is why the mystery remains. Not to keep you outside the Quran, to keep the ego from claiming ownership over it. The secret does not stand between you and Allah. It stands between your ego and the illusion that it can possess Allah's speech. Read that opening again, Ya-Sin. It is almost as though the Quran begins by whispering, before we continue, remember who is speaking. Everything after that sounds different. Everything, the deepest meanings remain hidden because reverence must grow before understanding. But even that is not the deepest point. Because now we arrive at the question that changes the entire conversation. Why would Allah preserve a mystery inside His final revelation until the end of time? The answer is more surprising than most of us have ever imagined. Most discussions begin here. What do the letters Ya-Sin mean? But Ibn Arabi consistently encourages the seeker to ask a different kind of question. What is Allah doing to me through this verse? Notice how radically different those questions are. The first assumes revelation exists primarily to satisfy curiosity. The second assumes revelation exists primarily to transform the one who receives it. That changes everything. The first assumes revelation exists primarily to satisfy curiosity. The second assumes revelation exists primarily to transform the one who receives it. That changes everything. Surah Al-Imran tells us that within the Quran are verses that are entirely clear and others whose full reality belongs to Allah. Classical scholars explained this in different ways, but they agreed on something essential. Not every aspect of revelation has been placed fully within human grasp. That is not a weakness of the Quran. It is one of its signs. If every divine mystery could be exhausted by human explanation, then revelation would never confront our limitations. It would simply confirm our confidence. But the Quran refuses to flatter the intellect. Instead, it purifies it. This is one reason Ibn Arabi emphasizes that true marifa, deep, experiential knowledge of Allah is not the accumulation of concepts alone. It is the transformation of the knower. You can increase information without increasing intimacy. You cannot increase true marifa without becoming a different person. That is the paradox. The greatest miracle of Ya-Sin may not be that no definitive explanation has survived. The greater miracle is that Allah preserved a place in His book where every generation must begin with humility. Think about that. The very first lesson of one of the most beloved chapters in the Quran is not information. It is adab, spiritual etiquette. The etiquette of standing before Allah without demanding that He fit inside the limits of your understanding. And once that etiquette enters the heart, every verse after it begins to sound different. Not because the Quran changed, because the listener did. The verse does not become deeper, the heart becomes quieter. But beautiful insights mean very little if they remain ideas. So before we finish, let me show you 3 simple practices that can completely change the way you open the Qur'an even tonight. Everything we've explored so far raises one obvious question. What do you actually do the next time you open the Qur'an? Not next Ramadan, not after you've memorized more Arabic, not after you've finished another book. The next time. Because if these ideas remain beautiful thoughts, they will never become lived realities. Ibn Arabi consistently reminds his readers that knowledge which does not transform the one who knows remains incomplete. The purpose of revelation is not simply to increase information. It is to reshape perception. So here are 3 practices you can begin today. Practice 1. The 30-second pause. The next time you reach Surah Yaseen or any passage of the Qur'an, don't begin reading immediately. Close the mushaf for just 30 seconds. Take a slow breath. Then ask yourself one question. What part of me is demanding understanding before trust? Don't answer quickly. Just let the question expose whatever is already there. Maybe it's impatience. Maybe it's pride. Maybe it's fear of uncertainty. Maybe it's the quiet belief that if you cannot explain something, it has little value. Notice what appears without trying to fix it. That simple pause interrupts the habit of rushing towards certainty. Instead of approaching the Qur'an as a problem to solve, you approach it as a meeting with your Lord. Practice 2. Change one question. Most of us naturally ask, what does this verse mean? Keep asking that, it is a good question, but add another one immediately afterward. Ask, what is this verse asking of me? Those 2 questions lead to very different destinations. The first fills your notebook, the second begins to reshape your character. Take out a journal. Write one sentence. Not a commentary, not a scholarly analysis, just one honest observation. What did this verse reveal about me today? You will be surprised how often the Qur'an begins reading you before you finish reading it. That is the movement from information toward transformation. Practice 3. Carry one mystery into your prayer. This may be the hardest practice. Choose one Quranic question that genuinely puzzles you. It does not have to be Y's name. It could be another verse whose wisdom you have not yet fully grasped. Then make a commitment. For 1 week, do not rush to search for another explanation. Instead, carry that question into your salah. Mention it quietly in your dua, not because you are refusing scholarship, but because you are learning that not every answer arrives as information. Some answers arrive as a changed heart. Sometimes, Allah answers by enlarging your capacity before enlarging your knowledge. There is something profoundly freeing about admitting, I do not know everything, and I do not need to know everything in order to trust the one who does. That sentence weakens the ego more effectively than many arguments ever could. Because faith is not sustained by possessing every answer. Faith is sustained by confidence in the one who never lacks them. The Qur'an changes your life most when you stop reading it only for explanations. One final thought remains. Let's return to where we began. At the beginning of this video, I asked you to imagine receiving a letter from someone you love, and the very first thing they wrote was something you could not explain. At first, that feels frustrating. You want clarity, you want certainty, you want to know exactly what every word means. But after everything we've explored together, maybe you can see that opening differently. The mystery was never standing between you and the one who sent the letter. It was inviting you to come closer in a different way. For 14 centuries, scholars have studied these letters with reverence. They have offered insights, possibilities, and careful reflections. Yet they also taught one of the most beautiful sentences a believer can ever say: Allah knows best. That sentence is not an admission of defeat. It is the language of humility. It is what the heart sounds like when it remembers the distance between the Creator and the creation. Ibn Arabi spent his life exploring the endless depths of the Qur'an, yet one lesson echoes throughout his works. The divine word is inexhaustible because the one who speaks it is infinite. Every sincere return to the Qur'an is another opportunity for Allah to unveil something, not necessarily a new meaning hidden in the text, but a new truth hidden within you. So the next time you read Yaseen, don't rush past it. Don't become anxious because you cannot possess it. Pause, remember who is speaking, and ask Allah to make your heart worthy of receiving whatever He chooses to reveal. Because in the end, the greatest meaning of those two letters may not be a definition you can write in the margin. It may be the humility they awaken every time you read them. The greatest secrets of the Qur'an are not those you can explain. They are those that quietly transform the one who listens. And before you leave, I'd like you to answer one question honestly in the comments. Think about the last time you opened the Qur'an. Were you trying to understand Allah's words, or were you allowing Allah's words to understand you? That single question may stay with you much longer than this video.